Lyra looked away. It's complicated. There are factions among my people, some with views more extreme than others. They believe we should remain apart from other species, that intermingling will dilute our strength. She met Zora's eyes again. I don't share those views. My work has been in cross-species genetics, searching for ways we might be more than what we are. That's made me unpopular in certain circles. Zora absorbed that, a dozen new questions springing to mind, but one look at Lyra's face told her now wasn't the time to push. Well, you're safe here, she said instead. The Odyssey may not look like much, but she'll get you where you need to go. Thank you, Captain. Lyra's hand tightened on hers briefly before letting go. For everything. It's not every day one meets a human willing to bare their throat to a vampire. I'm not most humans, Zora said with a tired grin. No, Lyra murmured, something unreadable in her gaze. No, you certainly aren't. As Lyra left to let her rest, Zora couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. But then, she'd never been one to back down from a challenge. Unexpected consequences. The next few days passed in a blur as Zora recovered and Lyra settled into life aboard the Odyssey. Despite initial wariness from the crew, the vampires' calm demeanor and evident gratitude soon won them over. Zora found herself drawn to Lyra, fascinated by her tales of sanguine society and the cutting-edge research she'd been conducting. They spent long hours in the ship's lounge, trading stories over cups of synthesized blood for Lyra and strong coffee for Zora. It was during one such conversation that Zora noticed the first oddity. Lyra, always so poised, seemed to fumble with her cup, a flash of discomfort crossing her features. You all right? Zora asked, brow furrowing. Fine, Lyra assured, but her smile was strained. Just a little nausea. It'll pass. But it didn't pass. Over the next week, Lyra's little nausea progressed to frequent bouts of vomiting, coupled with dizziness, and a pallor that was pronounced even for a vampire. Concern gnawing at her gut, Zora all but dragged Lyra to the med bay, ignoring the vampire's weak protests. Dr. Nakano, the ship's resident medical marvel, ran every test in the book, his normally jovial face pinched with concentration. The results, when they came back, hit like a bombshell. She's pregnant, Dr. Nakano announced, disbelief coloring his tone. Around 2 weeks along by my estimate. Zora stared, shock robbing her of speech. Lyra, if possible, had gone even paler. That's not possible, the vampire whispered. My kind are not compatible with humans. We can't procreate with your species. Apparently you can, Dr. Nakano said, gesturing to the irrefutable proof on his screens. The fetus is definitely a hybrid, part human, part vampire. In the stunned silence that followed, pieces began to click into place in Zora's mind. The timing of the pregnancy, Lyra's initial guilt, the unprecedented nature of it all. It was my blood, wasn't it? She said slowly. When you fed from me to heal, something in my enhanced biology allowed this to happen. Lyra met her gaze, a myriad of emotions swirling in those dark depths. I don't know. I've never heard of such a thing. The bond between a vampire and their donor can be strong, but this... She trailed off, a hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach, wonder and fear warred on her face. Zora's mind raced. This changed everything. A human-vampire hybrid was uncharted territory, the implications staggering. And if word got out, we need to keep this quiet, she said, the beginnings of a plan forming. If those extremist factions among your people find out, they'll see this child as a threat. And there are those on our side who would seek to exploit it. Lyra nodded, visibly steeling herself. You're right. But Captain, Zora, what do we do? It was the first time Lyra had used her given name, and something in Zora's chest tightened at the sound of it. She reached out, clasping the vampire's hands in her own. We face it together, she said firmly. This child, whatever it means, is ours to protect now. And I'll be damned if I let anything happen to either of you. The smile Lyra gave her was small but genuine, laced with a tentative hope that Zara found herself returning. They were in uncharted space here, facing an uncertain future. But as she felt the slight tremor in Lyra's hands, saw the determined set of her jaw, Zara knew one thing for certain. Come what may, they would weather this storm as they had the first, side by side, indomitable in their shared humanity, even if one of them was a vampire. It was, after all, the Odyssey way. The rescue. The blaring of the proximity alarm jolted Captain Zara Hale out of a dreamless sleep. She rolled out of her bunk, adrenaline already surging through her veins as she pulled on her boots. "Talk to me. Aris," she called out, running a hand through her short dark hair. "Distress signal detected, Captain," the ship's eye responded. "An unidentified vessel has taken heavy damage and is adrift approximately 2.3 light-years off our port side." Zara frowned, making her way swiftly to the bridge. Strange for a ship to be this far out on the fringes. Her own vessel, the HCSS Odyssey, was only out here running long-range scans for potential colony sites. She strapped herself into the command chair, screens and holodisplays coming to life around her. "Life signs. 1, Captain. Fading." Aris responded. "The ship appears to be of sanguine design, and the life sign matches their physiology." Zara's brow creased further. The sanguine, known colloquially as vampires, were a powerful and insular species. It was rare to encounter one of their ships, especially in distress. "Set an intercept course, maximum burn," Zara ordered. Regulations be damned. She wasn't about to let someone die out here, vampire or not. "And alert Dr. Nakano to prepare the medbay." "Aye, Captain." The ship hummed as the engines engaged. As they neared visual range, Zara felt her breath catch. The alien ship had been torn open from stem to stern, debris spilling from the gash like entrails. Scorch marks pockmarked the hull. This had been no accident. "Aris, scan for any other vessels in the area," Zara said sharply. "Scan negative, Captain. We appear to be alone." Small mercies. Zara unbuckled herself. "I'm heading to the airlock. Keep a lock on my signal." The alien ship was a tomb, corridors choked with debris, and the acrid stench of burnt circuitry. Zara picked her way through carefully, suit lights playing over blackened bulkheads. She found the survivor in what was left of the ship's med bay, a female pinned beneath a collapsed beam. Violet blood pooled around her, stark against pale skin. Zara's suit had identified dozens of lacerations and internal injuries. "Easy there," Zara soothed as dark eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain. "I'm Captain Zara Hale. I'm here to help." "Lyra," the vampire gasped out. "My name." "Lyra." Zara nodded, already working to shift the debris. She froze as a too-cool hand grasped her wrist with surprising strength. "No time," Lyra hissed through gritted teeth. "Need. Blood. Only way." Zara understood with sudden, startling clarity. Vampires could heal, but they needed blood to do it. And by the look of Lyra's injuries, she needed a lot of it. More than a normal human could give and survive. But Zara was no normal human. Her body was laced with military-grade enhancements, including boosted blood production. A gift for this very situation. Mind made up, Zara unzipped her suit at the neck, baring her throat. "Do it." Lyra's eyes widened. "You would. I'm not about to let you die here. Bite me. That's an order." Something like awe and hunger warred in Lyra's gaze before she surged forward, fangs sinking into Zara's neck. There was pain, bright and sharp, then a rush of something else, a tugging warmth that spread through Zara's body. She heard Lyra moan, felt the vampire's grip tighten as she drank deep. The world began to spin, darkness creeping in at the edges, but Zara clung to consciousness with a soldier's grit. Just a little more. It could have been minutes or hours later when Lyra finally pulled back, lips stained crimson. The wounds that had been so grievous were now visibly knitting back together. Lyra looked at her with something like wonder, tinged by guilt. Before Zara could ponder it further, the blood loss hit her system like a freight train, and she slumped forward into waiting arms as oblivion claimed her. She came to slowly, the familiar hum of the Odyssey's engines a comforting background thrum. Med Bay, her foggy brain supplied, registering the crisp sheets and antiseptic tang. A cool hand slipped into hers, and she turned to meet fathomless black eyes in a face too lovely to be entirely human. Lyra, memories slotted back into place, and Zara managed a wry smile. "Welcome back, Captain," Lyra said softly. "You saved my life." All in a day's work, Zara tried to quip, but it came out rough. Lyra helped her sit up, pressing a cup of water into her hands. "Your crew has been quite accommodating, given the circumstances, though I suspect they're not entirely sure what to make of me." Zara huffed a laugh. "We don't get many vampires out here." "No, I don't suppose you would." Lyra's gaze turned distant. "I owe you an explanation." "That would be helpful, yeah. Starting with who shot up your ship and why." Lyra looked away. "It's complicated. There are factions among my people, some with views more extreme than others. They believe we should remain apart from other species, that intermingling will dilute our strength." She met Zara's eyes again. "I don't share those views. My work has been in cross-species genetics, searching for ways we might be more than what we are. That's made me unpopular in certain circles." Zara absorbed that, a dozen new questions springing to mind, but one look at Lyra's face told her now wasn't the time to push. "Well, you're safe here," she said instead. "The Odyssey may not look like much, but she'll get you where you need to go." "Thank you, Captain." Lyra's hand tightened on hers briefly before letting go. "For everything. It's not every day one meets a human willing to bare their throat to a vampire." "I'm not most humans," Zara said with a tired grin. "No," Lyra murmured, something unreadable in her gaze. "No, you certainly aren't." As Lyra left to let her rest, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. But then, she'd never been one to back down from a challenge. Whatever came next, she'd face it head-on. It was, after all, the human way. Unexpected consequences. The next few days passed in a blur as Zara recovered, and Lyra settled into life aboard the Odyssey. Despite initial wariness from the crew, the vampires' calm demeanor and evident gratitude soon won them over. Zara found herself drawn to Lyra, fascinated by her tales of sanguine society and the cutting-edge research she'd been conducting. They spent long hours in the ship's lounge, trading stories over cups of synthesized blood for Lyra and strong coffee for Zara. It was during one such conversation that Zara noticed the first oddity. Lyra, always so poised, seemed to fumble with her cup, a flash of discomfort crossing her features. "You all right?" Zara asked, brow furrowing. "Fine," Lyra assured, but her smile was strained. "Just a little nausea. It'll pass." But it didn't pass. Over the next week, Lyra's little nausea progressed to frequent bouts of vomiting, coupled with dizziness and a pallor that was pronounced even for a vampire. Concern gnawing at her gut, Zara all but dragged Lyra to the med bay, ignoring the vampire's weak protests. Dr. Nakano, the ship's resident medical marvel, ran every test in the book, his normally jovial face pinched with concentration. The results, when they came back, hit like a bombshell. "She's pregnant," Dr. Nakano announced, disbelief coloring his tone. "Around 2 weeks along by my estimate." Zara stared, shock robbing her of speech. Lyra, if possible, had gone even paler. "That's not possible," the vampire whispered. "My kind are not compatible with humans. We can't procreate with your species." "Apparently you can," Dr. Nakano said, gesturing to the irrefutable proof on his screens. "The fetus is definitely a hybrid, part human, part vampire." In the stunned silence that followed, Pieces began to click into place in Zora's mind. The timing of the pregnancy, Lyra's initial guilt, the unprecedented nature of it all. "It was my blood, wasn't it?" she said slowly. "When you fed from me to heal, something in my enhanced biology allowed this to happen." Lyra met her gaze, a myriad of emotions swirling in those dark depths. "I don't know. I've never heard of such a thing. The bond between a vampire and their donor can be strong, but this..." She trailed off, a hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. Wonder and fear warred on her face. Zara's mind raced. This changed everything. A human-vampire hybrid was uncharted territory, the implications staggering. And if word got out, "We need to keep this quiet," she said, the beginnings of a plan forming. "If those extremist factions among your people find out, they'll see this child as a threat. And there are those on our side who would seek to exploit it." Lyra nodded, visibly steeling herself. "You're right. But Captain..." "Zora, what do we do?" It was the first time Lyra had used her given name, and something in Zora's chest tightened at the sound of it. She reached out, clasping the vampire's hands in her own. "We face it together," she said firmly. "This child, whatever it means, is ours to protect now. And I'll be damned if I let anything happen to either of you." The smile Lyra gave her was small but genuine, laced with a tentative hope that Zara found herself returning. They were in uncharted space here, facing an uncertain future. But as she felt the slight tremor in Lyra's hands, saw the determined set of her jaw, Zara knew one thing for certain. Come what may, they would weather this storm as they had the first, side by side, indomitable in their shared humanity, even if one of them was a vampire. It was, after all, the Odyssey way. The hunt. Keeping Lyra's pregnancy under wraps proved easier said than done aboard the close-knit Odyssey. Dr. Nakano was sworn to secrecy, but curious glances followed the vampire wherever she went, drawn by her changing physique and the protective presence of Zora never far from her side. Matters came to a head when ARS, ever vigilant, detected an encrypted transmission piggybacking on their comm frequencies. Zara's blood ran cold as the AI unscrambled the contents, a message from an unknown source detailing Lyra's condition and the Odyssey's coordinates. They had a mole aboard, and worse, Lyra's people knew. "We need to go dark," Zara decided, jaw set. "Cut all non-essential comms, change course. We can't risk leading them straight to us." Lyra, now showing significantly at 4 months along, paced the confines of Zora's quarters, agitation in every line of her body. "It won't be enough," she said, frustration and fear bleeding into her tone. "My people are relentless. Once they have a scent, they don't let go." Zora paused in her own pacing, turning to face the vampire. "Then we make a stand. We can't run forever, and I won't have our child born in hiding." Something flickered in Lyra's eyes at that, a warmth that had been growing steadily over the months. "Our child," she echoed softly. "I never thought I'd hear those words from anyone, let alone a human." Zara's expression softened, her hand coming up to cup Lyra's cheek. "Get used to it. This kid's going to have the most unconventional, baddest moms in the galaxy." The moment was broken by the blare of alarms, Ares's calm voice belying the urgency of the situation. "Captain, long-range scanners have detected multiple sanguine vessels on an intercept course. ETA 2 hours. Zara's spine straightened, the soldier in her taking over. "Battle stations," she barked into the comm. "All crew to their posts. This is not a drill." She turned back to Lyra, apology and resolve warring in her eyes. "I need you to stay here. I can't risk you or the baby getting caught in the crossfire." Lyra looked ready to protest, but a kick from the child growing within her seemed to decide the matter. "Be careful," she whispered instead, pulling Zara into a fierce embrace. Zara held her tight, memorizing the feel of her, the scent. "Always am," she murmured into silver hair. Then she was pulling away, striding out the door and towards an uncertain future, the phantom warmth of Lyra's lips on hers, a talisman against the coming storm. The battle, when it came, was brutal. The sanguine ships, sleek and deadly, danced around the bulkier Odyssey, testing her defenses with surgical strikes. Zara gritted her teeth as another volley rocked the ship, sparks flying from overloaded consoles. "Shields at 40%, Captain," Air Rice reported, imperturbable as ever. "Hull breach on decks 4 and 5. Emergency force fields holding." Zara's mind raced, outmaneuvered but not outgunned. The Sanguine were faster, but the Odyssey packed a meaner punch. If they could just get a clear shot. "What the hell is that?" her weapons officer, Lieutenant Reeves, exclaimed. Zara's head snapped up, eyes widening as a new ship dropped out of warp, larger and more heavily armed than the others. Its hull was emblazoned with a crimson sigil that made Lyra, watching the feeds with white-knuckled fists, gasped. "That's the mark of the Deathbringers," she breathed. "The most extreme of the Sanguine factions. They consider themselves purists, dedicated to maintaining the supposed sanctity of our race." Zara's lip curled. "Charming. Let's see how they handle a bit of human ingenuity, shall we?" Under her guidance, the Odyssey went on the offensive, luring the Sanguine ships into the gravity well of a nearby moon. The vampires, so fixated on their prize, failed to notice the trick until it was too late. Caught in the pull, their ships were sitting ducks as the Odyssey rained fire upon them. Zora's eyes hard as she watched them burn. The Deathbringer ship, larger and more cumbersome, was the last to fall, but fall it did, breaking apart under the onslaught. The bridge erupted into cheers as the last of the Sanguine vessels winked out on the scanners, but Zara held up a hand, silencing them. "This was just the first wave," she said grimly. "There will be more. We hurt them today, but we also pissed them off. They'll be back, and in greater numbers." She turned to her crew, proud and resolute in the face of adversity. Her family. "So we best be ready for them. We've shown them what human spirit can do. Now let's show them what it can endure. For Lyra, for the baby, and for every soul on this ship, we stand together. We fight together. And if need be, we die together. But we do not yield. Not now, not ever. Is that understood?" A chorus of "Aye, Captain," rang out, filling the battle-scarred bridge. And in that moment, Zara knew that whatever came next, they would face it as they always had, as one crew, one people, one human race, unconquered and unconquerable, even to the very end. Tenuous alliances. In the aftermath of the battle, the Odyssey limped to the nearest friendly outpost, a small but well-defended station on the outskirts of human space. They were welcomed with open arms, the station's commander, a grizzled veteran named Hawkins, offering them dry dock and repair facilities. "About time someone gave those fanged bastards a bloody nose," he said, shaking Zora's hand with a grip like iron. "Never thought I'd see the day when a vamp and a human would be fighting side by side, though." His gaze flicked to Lyra, standing proud and pregnant at Zora's side. There was no judgment there, just a wry sort of acceptance. "Times change, Commander," Zora said, placing a hand on the small of Lyra's back. "And we change with them." Hawkins grunted, but there was a glimmer of respect in his eye. "That we do, Captain. That we do." As repairs on the Odyssey got underway, Zora threw herself into planning their next move. The Deathbringers would regroup. That much was certain, and they couldn't count on facing them alone again. "We need allies," she said, poring over star charts and intel reports in the station's command center. "The Sanguine aren't a monolith. If there are factions as extreme as the Deathbringers, there must be those who oppose them." Lyra, one hand resting on her swollen belly, nodded. "There are. Many of my people believe in coexistence, in finding a way to live in peace with humans and other species, but they are scattered, often suppressed by the more militant factions." Zara turned to her, a spark of an idea forming. "Could you bring them together? Unite them against a common threat?" Lyra hesitated, but there was a glint of determination in her eye. I can try. I still have contacts, those who believe as I do. With the right motivation, they may be willing to take a stand. And so, as the Odyssey's wounds were mended, a different kind of healing began. Lyra reached out across the stars, calling to those who shared her dream of a universe where human and vampire could stand as equals. Slowly, tentatively, they began to respond. A scientist here, a diplomat there, each one a flickering candle in the vast darkness of space. They met in secret, aboard the Odyssey, and in hidden corners of the station, forging bonds and strategies over shared blood and shared hope. Zara watched it all with a fierce pride burning in her chest. This was what humanity was meant for, she thought. Not just to survive, but to thrive. To reach out across the void, finding common ground with those once thought irrevocably different. But even as their nascent alliance grew, so too did the threats arrayed against them. The Deathbringers, far from cowed, had begun to gather their strength, calling to the most radical elements of sanguine society. Their message was one of purity, of preserving the supposed sanctity of the vampire race at any cost. Lyra's pregnancy, once a closely guarded secret, became a rallying cry, a symbol of the contamination they sought to purge. They're calling for a crusade, Lyra said, her face drawn and pale, as she listened to intercepted transmissions. A holy war against anything and anyone they deem impure. Zara's jaw clenched, her hand tightening on the hilt of her sidearm. Then we'll give them a war. But it won't be holy, and it won't be on their terms. She turned to the assembled crew and allies, a motley mix of human and vampire, united by circumstance and conviction. We've all lost something to this conflict, she said, her voice ringing clear in the crowded room. Family, friends, a sense of safety in a universe gone mad. But we stand to lose so much more if we don't take a stand. The Deathbringers want a future where there's no place for those like Lyra and our child. No place for cooperation, for understanding, for growth. I say we show them a different future, one where we stand together, not apart, where our differences make us stronger, not weaker. It won't be easy. We'll be outnumbered, outgunned, and up against an enemy that knows no mercy. But we have something they don't, each other. So stand with me, fight with me, and if need be, die with me, because this is a future worth fighting for, and I can't think of a better bunch of misfits to fight for it with. A roar of approval met her words. Human and vampire voices merged in a single defiant cry. And as Zara looked out over the sea of determined faces, Lyra's hand clasped tight in her own. She felt a swell of something bright and fierce in her chest. Hope, undiminished and unyielding. The kind of hope that could change the stars. Interspecies intrigue. As the alliance between moderate vampires and humans solidified, whispers began to reach Zora's ears of a different kind of threat. Not the overt aggression of the Deathbringers, but something more insidious, more subtle. There are factions within both our governments that see opportunity in this crisis, Lyra said, her face drawn with worry. They believe that the child I carry could be a weapon, a tool to tip the balance of power. Zara's blood ran cold at the thought. The idea of their unborn child, a symbol of hope and unity, being twisted into an instrument of war was unbearable. We can't let that happen, she said, steel in her voice. This baby is a child, not a chess piece. But even as she said the words, Zora knew it wouldn't be that simple. The political landscape was shifting beneath their feet, old certainties crumbling in the face of this new paradigm. There were those on the human side who saw the alliance as a betrayal, a capitulation to an ancient enemy. They pointed to centuries of blood and strife, to the innate predatory nature of the vampire race. Can a wolf lie down with a lamb? They asked, their voices dripping with scorn. Can a leopard change its spots? And on the sanguine side, even among the moderates, there were those who chafed at the idea of a half-human child, a dilution of their pure blood. What will this mean for our identity? They whispered in the shadows. For our culture, our way of life. Navigating these treacherous waters fell to Zara and Lyra, the unlikely pair at the heart of this maelstrom. They attended clandestine meetings and backroom negotiations, arguing, persuading, and sometimes outright threatening to keep their fragile coalition together. It was exhausting work, made all the more draining by Lyra's advancing pregnancy. The vampire's strength was flagging, the toll of carrying a hybrid child weighing heavily on her frame. Zara watched her with growing concern, the protectiveness that had once been instinctive now a constant, gnawing worry. She longed to spirit Lyra away, to find some quiet corner of the universe where they could raise their child in peace. But there was no peace to be found. Not yet. Not while the Deathbringers still loomed, a shadow over all their futures. And not while the specter of betrayal lurked within their own ranks. It came to a head on a nameless moon, in a bunker buried deep beneath the barren surface. A meeting of the Alliance's inner circle to discuss strategy and share intelligence. Zara was on edge from the moment they arrived, her soldiers' instincts screaming of danger. The bunker was too quiet, the attendees too nervous. Lyra, at her side, was tense as a coiled spring. It was Lyra who saw it first, her vampire reflexes faster than Zora's enhanced human ones. A glint of metal in the shadows, the telltale red of a targeting laser. "Down!" she screamed, tackling Zara to the ground as a hail of gunfire erupted overhead. Chaos descended, allies turning on each other in a confusion of blood and betrayal. Zara fought like a demon, Lyra a whirlwind at her back, but they were outnumbered and cut off from the Odyssey. In the end, it was only Hawkins and a handful of loyal soldiers who got them out, fighting a desperate rearguard action as they fled to their shuttle. As the airlock sealed behind them, and they blasted away from the moon, Zara held a shaking Lyra in her arms, feeling the frantic kick of their child beneath her hand. "It's not over," she whispered into the vampire's hair. "They've shown their hand, but we're still in the game. We'll find out who was behind this, and we'll make them pay." But even as she said the words, Zora couldn't shake the icy grip of fear around her heart. The betrayal had come from within, which meant their enemies were closer than they'd ever imagined. And with Lyra's time growing short, the stakes had never been higher. The endgame was coming, and it would take every ounce of human ingenuity, vampire cunning, and sheer, stubborn will to survive it. But then, Zara thought as she held her strange little family close, when had the odds ever stopped them before? They were, after all, only human and vampire. And whatever their child would be. And that, in the end, might just be enough. Endgame. The Odyssey hurtled through the void, engines straining as it pushed towards the looming confrontation. On the bridge, Zara stood resolute, her eyes fixed on the view screen and the Armada assembling ahead. The Deathbringers had called in every favor, rallied every ally, in their bid to wipe out the Alliance and the threat it represented. Their ships hung in space like angry hornets, bristling with weapons and thrumming with menace. But they were not alone. Flanking the Odyssey were the ships of their own coalition, vampire and human vessels flying in formation, united in purpose and determination. It was a sight Zora had once thought impossible, a dream made manifest through blood, sweat, and unyielding will. At her side, Lyra stood unbowed, her pregnant belly a defiant bulge beneath her tactical gear. She had refused to remain behind, insisting her place was with her mate and her crew. "We started this together," she had said, her eyes blazing. "We'll finish it together." Now, as the enemy loomed before them, Zara reached out and took Lyra's hand, feeling the answering squeeze of the vampire's fingers. "No matter what happens," she said softly, "I'm glad I met you, Lyra. Glad we had this chance, however brief, to change the universe." Lyra turned to her, a fierce smile on her lips despite the fear in her eyes. "We're not done changing it yet, my love. Not by a long shot." The first volley of fire interrupted any response Zora might have made, the Odyssey rocking under the impact. The view screen dissolved into a maelstrom of light and destruction as the battle was joined in earnest. It was a fight like none Zora had ever experienced. A desperate, no-holds-barred brawl on a scale that defied comprehension. Ships wheeled and dived in a deadly ballet, explosions blooming in the eternal night of space. The Odyssey was at the heart of it, Zora's crew working with seamless efficiency as they fought to hold the line. On the gunnery decks, human and vampire stood shoulder to shoulder, pouring fire into the enemy ranks. But for every Deathbringer ship they took down, two more seemed to take its place. They were being overwhelmed, the sheer numbers turning against them. Zara gritted her teeth as another explosion shook the ship, warning lights flashing across her console. They needed an edge, something to turn the tide. It was Lyra who provided it. The vampire had been monitoring communications, using her innate abilities to sift through the chaos of the battle. Now she turned to Zara, triumph in her eyes. "I found the command ship," she said. "The Deathbringer flagship. If we can take it out, the rest of their fleet will be thrown into disarray." Zara didn't hesitate. "Do it," she ordered. "Give the coordinates to gunnery. Every battery, every missile, everything we've got." The Odyssey surged forward, the battered ship putting on one last burst of speed. Around them, their allies rallied, forming a wedge aimed straight at the heart of the enemy. The flagship loomed ahead, a monstrous construct bristling with firepower. It turned ponderously to face them, its massive cannon swiveling to bear. But it was too late. The Odyssey, flanked by its vampire and human wingmen, was already upon it. Missiles and energy beams lanced out, impacting on the flagship's shields in a blaze of destruction. For a moment, it seemed the barrage would have no effect. The flagship's shields glowed, absorbing the onslaught. But then, with a flash of light that seared the eyes, they gave way. Fire blossomed along the flagship's hull as the Alliance's weapons found their mark. Explosions chained across its surface, secondary detonations ripping it apart from within. In the heart of the Odyssey, in a medbay hastily converted into a makeshift delivery room, Lyra screamed, not from the rocking of the ship or the sounds of battle, but from the contraction that gripped her, the child within her choosing this moment to enter the world. On the bridge, Zara watched in awe as the flagship came apart, the symbol of the Deathbringer's hatred and intolerance consumed in a ball of cleansing flame. Around it, the rest of the enemy fleet fell into chaos, ships scattering or surrendering as news of their leader's destruction spread. It was over. Against all odds, against all expectation, they had won. Zara wanted to cheer, to shout her triumph to the stars. But her heart was with Lyra, with their child. She turned, ready to race to the medbay, but found her way blocked by Dr. Nakano. The man's face was split by an enormous grin. "Captain," he said, "you need to come with me. There's someone you need to meet." In the medbay, in a pool of sweat and tears and joy, Lyra held their daughter. The baby was tiny, wrinkled, perfect, her skin a soft lavender and her eyes a familiar black. Zara approached as if in a dream, hardly daring to breathe. Lyra looked up, her face tired but suffused with a love so intense it stole the air from Zara's lungs. "Meet your daughter," she whispered. With trembling hands, Zara took the baby, cradling her against her chest. The little one squirmed, blinking up at her with those fathomless eyes. "Hello, little one," Zara murmured. "I'm your mother, and I promise I will always keep you safe. You and your mama both." Outside, the universe was changing, shifting into a new shape forged in the crucible of their struggle. There would be challenges ahead, rebuilding, diplomacy, the hard work of forging a lasting peace. But for now, in this moment, there was only this: a family, born of two worlds but belonging to both. A love that had defied the odds, that had proven stronger than hate, stronger than fear. A hope for a future where such distinctions no longer mattered, where what united was always stronger than what divided. Zara looked at Lyra, at their daughter, and saw that future reflected in their eyes, and she smiled, ready to meet it head-on. That concludes the story. Let me know if you would like me to generate the SEO-optimized YouTube video description, title suggestions, and image prompts to accompany it.